I almost didn't go out that night. It was one of those Fridays where I was already tired before anything even started, but my friends kept pushing me to come. I figured I'd have a couple drinks, hang out for a bit, and leave early. The club was packed, loud, the usual. I had 2 drinks over a few hours, enough to feel it, but not enough to be out of control. I remember being very aware of that, because I knew I'd be driving. At some point, a guy came up to me while I was dancing with my friends. He wasn't weird at first, just kind of persistent. He asked my name, where I was from, normal stuff. I answered and kept it polite. We danced for a minute, nothing serious. I didn't want to be rude, so I went along with it. Then he asked for my number. I told him I don't give it out. He smiled, but it didn't really reach his eyes. It was one of those forced smiles people do when they're trying not to react. "Come on," he said. I shook my head. "I'm good, really." There was a pause there that felt longer than it should have been. Then he nodded like it didn't matter. "All right," he said. "Maybe I'll see you around." Something about the way he said it really stuck with me, but I brushed it off. I went back to my friends and didn't think much about it after. When I left, it was a little after midnight. The parking lot had thinned out, but there were still people walking around waiting for rides and talking. I was parked toward the back under a light that flickered on and off. I remember noticing that and thinking I should have parked closer. As I was walking to my car, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned slightly and saw a guy heading in the same direction. I didn't think anything of it at first. It wasn't until I got closer to my car that I realized it was him. He didn't say anything, didn't try to catch up, just kept walking like he was heading somewhere else. I got in my car, locked the doors right away, and sat there for a second. I checked my mirrors out of habit. He walked past a few rows over and disappeared between cars. That should have been the end of it. The exit from the lot loops around the side of the building before you get onto the main road. As I was making that turn, I noticed a car pull out behind me. I didn't think anything of it. It wasn't until a few blocks later that I started paying attention. The same headlights were still behind me. Same distance, same speed. I switched lanes at a light. They switched too. That's when I started to feel it. That quiet kind of panic where your brain is trying to come up with a reasonable explanation, but your gut already knows. I turned onto a side street that I normally don't take. The car turned with me. I told myself it could still be coincidence. There are only so many ways out of that area. But then I took another turn, and another, and every time the car followed. At that point, I knew. My hands were tight on the steering wheel. I could feel my pulse in my fingers. Didn't want to speed or do anything reckless, but I didn't want to go home either. The last thing I wanted was for him to know where I lived. I started heading toward a busier road, somewhere with more traffic and lights. The car stayed behind me the entire time. It wasn't aggressive at first, just steady and controlled. Then after a few minutes, he got closer. Close enough that his headlights filled my rearview mirror. He flashed them once, then again. I ignored it. A few seconds later, he honked. Not a quick tap. A long, loud blast that made me jump. I kept driving. He honked again. That's when I made the decision to not go home at all. I remembered there was a 24-hour gas station a few miles ahead, right off a main road. It was always busy, even late. I headed straight for it. The entire drive there, he stayed right behind me. Every lane change I made, he matched. Every turn, he followed. At one point, he pulled into the lane next to me. I tried not to look, but I did for a second. It was him. Same guy from the club. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was just staring straight at me. That somehow felt worse. I pulled into the gas station quickly, a little too fast, and parked right in front near the entrance where the lights were brightest. I stayed in the car. I didn't get out. I didn't turn the engine off. I just sat there watching the road. His car slowed as it passed the entrance. For a second, I thought he was going to turn in. He didn't. He kept going straight and disappeared down the road. I sat there for a while, trying to calm down. There were people around, a couple cars at the pumps, someone walking into the store. Everything felt normal again. After a few minutes, I convinced myself it was over. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he realized I wasn't going to stop. I waited a little longer just to be sure. Then I pulled out and drove home a different way. I kept checking my mirrors the entire time. I didn't see him again. When I got to my apartment complex, I parked close to the entrance under a bright light. I didn't want to be in the back lot. I got out, locked my car, and walked straight to my building. I remember looking over my shoulder once or twice, but everything looked empty. I went inside, locked my door, and leaned against it for a second. I felt shaken, but also relieved. I told myself I handled it the right way. About 10 minutes later, I went to my window to check the parking lot. I don't know why. I just felt like I needed to. I pulled the curtain back slightly and looked out. At first, everything looked the same. Then I saw a car slowly turn into the lot. It didn't drive around like someone looking for a space. It drove straight to a spot across from my car and parked. My heart sank immediately with fear. I knew it was him before I could even see clearly. The engine shut off. The headlights went dark, but the car stayed there. No one got out. No door opened. It just sat there facing my building. I stood there for a long time, barely moving, just watching, waiting for something to happen. Eventually, I grabbed my phone and called a friend. I didn't want to call the police yet. I didn't even know what I'd say. "There's a car outside," I told her. "I think it's the guy from earlier." She told me to stay inside, keep the doors locked, and call if anything changed. I stayed by the window. After a while, I saw movement inside the car. The driver's door opened. He slowly stepped out. Even from that distance, I recognized him. He looked up at my building, not at random windows. He stared directly at mine. I stepped back immediately and closed the curtain. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. I didn't go back to the window after that. I turned off all the lights and stayed quiet. I could hear my phone still connected to my friend, her voice asking if I was okay, but I couldn't answer right away. All I could think about was the way he pulled in, like he knew exactly where to go. The police came later that night. They searched the lot, but by the time they got there, his car was gone. I gave them a description, but there wasn't much else to go on. I don't go to the club anymore, and I don't drive home alone at night after going out. The part that still bothers me isn't just that he followed me. It's that after I lost him, he already knew where I was going. That's when I realized the drive home had never been the scary part. Has he followed me from the club before? For 3 mornings in a row, the same dark gray sedan was parked across from my apartment building. The first time I noticed the guy, I honestly didn't think anything about it. I live in a pretty crowded apartment complex, so you end up seeing the same cars over and over again anyway. Same people leaving for work in the morning. Same neighbors smoking outside at night. Same delivery drivers getting lost. Looking back now, that car should have registered with me a lot sooner. But at the time, it blended in too easily with everything else around the complex. I only remembered it later because of how still the driver always was. Most people in parked cars are doing something. Looking at their phone, drinking coffee, adjusting GPS, whatever. This guy never seemed to move. The windows were tinted enough that I couldn't really make out his face. I'd just see the outline of someone sitting there. The first weird thing happened at a gas station. I'd left work late and stopped to fill up before heading home. I remember being exhausted that day. I'd worked almost 12 hours and my brain was completely fried. I wasn't paying attention to anything except getting home and taking a shower. While the pump was running, I looked up toward the road and saw the gray sedan pulling into the station. I still didn't think I'm being followed. Not yet. But I remember watching the car in the reflection of the gas station window while pretending to check messages on my phone. The sedan parked 2 spaces behind me and just sat there with the engine running. Nobody got out. That's what stuck with me. I finished pumping gas and pulled out first. The sedan left about 10 seconds later. Again, I told myself it was coincidence. People drive the same routes all the time. But then I noticed it behind me at the 3rd stoplight, then the 4th. At one point I switched lanes suddenly just to see if it would continue straight. It switched lanes too. I can't explain the feeling you get when your brain finally stops making excuses for something. It's almost embarrassing at first, like you realize you've been ignoring something obvious. I remember my hands getting sweaty on the steering wheel. I told myself not to panic. Maybe they just happened to be turning the same direction. So I made another random turn. The sedan turned too. That's when I stopped heading home. Instead, I drove toward a busier part of town, where there were still people out walking around. I figured if somebody really was following me, they'd back off once there were more witnesses around. The sedan stayed behind me the entire time, never speeding up, never trying to pass me, just matching me. I finally pulled into a grocery store parking lot because it was brightly lit and still crowded that late at night. I parked near the entrance and sat there trying to decide what to do. The gray sedan parked 4 rows away. I could feel the guy watching me even though I still couldn't clearly see him. I ended up calling my friend Tyler because I didn't want to sound dramatic by calling the police over a feeling. He answered half asleep. "I think someone's following me." "What?" "There's this car. It's been behind me for like 20 minutes. Tyler immediately sounded awake after that. He told me to stay where people could see me and not go home. While I was on the phone with him, the sedan slowly backed out of the parking spot. Then it drove past me. Not fast. Slow enough that I could finally see the driver clearly through the windshield. It was a creepy middle-aged guy with dark hair and glaring eyes. And he was smiling at me. Not a friendly smile either. More like the look someone gives when they know something you don't. He kept driving and disappeared out onto the road. I remember finally breathing again after he left. Tyler told me to still avoid going home for a while just in case, so I drove around another 30 minutes before heading back to my apartment. By the time I got there, I'd mostly convinced myself it was over. Then I saw the sedan parked across from my building. My stomach dropped so hard it actually hurt. The lights were off this time, but I knew it was the same car. I just sat there in my own parking lot staring at it, trying to think rationally. Maybe he lived there. Maybe I was connecting things that weren't connected, but deep down I already knew. I stayed at Tyler's apartment that night instead. The next morning I came back home to grab clothes for work. That's when I noticed my doormat had been moved slightly sideways. Again, it sounds stupid now, but little things become terrifying once you're already on edge. I knew exactly how I left that mat because I always straighten it with my foot before unlocking the door. I went inside carefully. Nothing looked stolen. Nothing looked damaged. But my bedroom closet door was open. I never leave it open. I checked the apartment twice before finally calming down enough to tell myself I was spiraling. Then I walked into the bathroom and saw my shower curtain partially pulled back. What scared me wasn't the curtain itself. It was the realization that if someone had been standing behind it while I walked through the apartment, I never would have noticed. I checked anyway. Nobody there. At that point, I was genuinely shaken. I called out of work and drove straight to a hardware store to buy cameras. The whole time I kept scanning traffic for the gray sedan. I didn't ever see it, and somehow this made me feel more nervous. That night I installed one camera facing my front door and another aimed toward the parking lot outside my apartment window. Honestly, once they were up, I started feeling a little stupid about the whole thing. Cameras made it feel manageable, rational. Like if somebody really was following me, I'd have proof. And if nobody showed up, then maybe I'd just let my imagination get away from me for a few days. I stayed up later than usual watching TV with the volume low, checking the camera feeds every now and then on my phone. The first motion alert came around 11:40. I grabbed my phone immediately, heart already racing before I even opened the app. It was just a red pickup truck pulling into the lot. A guy got out carrying grocery bags and walked into the building next to mine. That actually helped calm me down a little. Midnight came and went. Then another alert around 12:15. This time it was two college-age girls laughing while walking through the parking lot. One of them waved her arms at the camera after noticing it. Again, normal. By 1 a.m., I started realizing how many random notifications cameras actually send. Headlights moving across the lot, people walking dogs, neighbors getting home late. The more alerts I checked, the more embarrassed I felt for convincing myself somebody was stalking me. I even remember laughing at myself a little. I'd basically turned a gray car into some kind of paranoia spiral. Around 1:45, I finally laid down in bed and decided I was done checking the app every 5 minutes. The phone buzzed again a little after 2 o'clock. I almost ignored it. When I opened the notification, it was just another car entering the lot. Different vehicle this time, white SUV. Nothing unusual about it. That's when I finally started relaxing for real. I remember thinking, yeah, okay, you overreacted. I set my phone on the nightstand and turned the lights off. I must have drifted off for maybe 20 minutes before another alert woke me up. 2:30 a.m. Still half asleep, I opened the app expecting another random car. At first, all I saw were headlights turning into the parking lot. Then the gray sedan slowly pulled into frame. The second I recognized it, I was fully awake again. The car moved slowly through the lot before stopping directly across from my building. The engine stayed running. I stared at the screen waiting for the driver to get out, but he didn't. Nothing happened for almost 5 minutes. No movement, no doors opening, just the sedan sitting there. I remember trying to calm myself down again, telling myself maybe it really was someone who lived nearby. Maybe I just happened to notice the same car too many times and built this whole thing up in my head. Then another notification popped up. Front door camera, movement detected. My stomach dropped instantly. I switched feeds expecting maybe a neighbor walking past the apartment. At first the hallway looked empty. The camera was pointed slightly down the corridor and nothing seemed out of place. Then, slowly, somebody leaned just enough into frame for part of their shoulder to appear. Like they were intentionally avoiding the camera. I couldn't see their face, just the side of a dark hoodie. They stayed completely still for several seconds. Then they slowly walked toward my door and carefully reached their hand out and rested it lightly on my doorknob. I felt stuck and didn't know what to do. I still couldn't see their face because of the black hoodie. They just stood there. I remember holding my breath watching the screen because the whole thing felt wrong in a way I can't fully explain. Whoever it was wasn't acting drunk or confused or aggressive. After almost a minute, the hand disappeared and the person stepped back out of frame. I switched back to the parking lot camera immediately. The gray sedan was still there, driver still inside. That's when I realized whoever was at my door hadn't come from the car. Because while I'd been watching the hallway feed, the sedan never moved once. This time the headlights were on, aimed directly toward my building, washing out part of the camera feed so everything looked overly bright and hard to make out clearly. At first I didn't see anything. Then I noticed a figure standing in front of the car. Just a dark silhouette, completely still, facing my apartment building, facing my window. And behind them I could faintly make out the outline of the driver still sitting inside the sedan. Because of the headlights, I couldn't make out a face or even details about what the person outside was wearing. It was just this motionless figure standing there in the middle of the parking lot at 2:30 in the morning. I remember staring at the screen waiting for them to move, trying to convince myself maybe it was somebody talking to the driver or a neighbor outside smoking. But they didn't move. They just stood there. 20 seconds doesn't sound long until you're watching someone silently stare at your apartment in the middle of the night. It felt way longer. And the entire time, the sedan stayed idling behind them like it was waiting. Then the figure finally turned, walked calmly to the passenger side door, opened it, and got in beside the driver. A second later, the sedan started creeping forward through the parking lot without ever turning the headlights off. Not speeding away, not peeling out, just slowly rolling past my building like the driver wanted one last look at my apartment before leaving. I watched the camera feed until the taillights disappeared out of frame. I sat there in complete silence for a few minutes. Then it hit me. The gray sedan had always made sure I noticed it every time. At the gas station, at stoplights, and parking lots. It wanted to be noticed. It had kept my attention outside and away from my apartment. What if the driver was never the real threat? What if the whole point of following me was just to keep me distracted long enough for somebody else to get inside? Whoever had been standing outside my door already knew exactly which apartment was mine. We checked out of the hotel early that morning because we wanted to beat the traffic. We had just celebrated my wife's birthday at Miramar Beach. Nothing about the drive started out unusual. It was one of those calm stretches where the road feels almost empty and you're just kind of easing back into real life after a few days away. Everything was normal until we hit a slowdown. I was traveling at a smooth pace in the left side fast lane before the traffic ahead of us started. Everyone's brake lights started popping up in waves. That's when I noticed the truck behind us. It was a large black pickup. I remember that clearly because it stood out against everything else. It came up really fast and then immediately settled right behind me, way too close for comfort. Not just close, it was nearly riding my bumper. There was nowhere to go. The cars in front of me were all slowed down, and the whole lane was blocked. The truck behind me started revving its engine repeatedly. You could feel it in the car every time it happened. At first I thought that the erratic driving and revving was just a general frustration or impatience for the traffic. I never believed that it was anything directed toward us. We hadn't caused the slowdown, so why would anyone have an issue with us? I remember looking in the rearview mirror and seeing how close it was. It honestly looked like if I tapped my brakes even slightly, it would have crashed into us. That's when I said to my wife, "This guy is way too close." There wasn't much else to say at that point, because there was literally nowhere to move. The whole lane was packed and crawling. When traffic finally started picking up again, things opened slightly. The left lane started picking up speed. The right lane had a gap ahead for slower cars to get over. My first thought was simple: let him pass. If he's in a hurry, just get him away from us. I started to signal to move over to the right lane, but before I could even complete the lane change, the truck made its move. It shot into the right lane almost immediately, so fast that it came dangerously close to the right side of my rear bumper. I actually had to correct slightly to avoid contact, and then just as quickly it cut back in front of me with no space or warning, just straight across into my lane, completely cutting us off. I had to hit the brakes hard, because otherwise we would have gone straight into the back of that truck. And when it stopped in front of us, it didn't just slow down normally, it brake checked us hard. The truck's tires kicked up gravel and dust off the freeway shoulder, and it actually came back onto our windshield in a light spray. It made everything feel more chaotic in the moment. At the same time, I saw the driver. Focusing on driving, I couldn't pay attention to much detail. He was a bigger man. His head and left arm were hanging out of the window. The disturbing part about it is his head was completely turned toward us, without any care for the road in front of him. He was looking directly back at us and yelling, while still somehow controlling the truck. I couldn't hear the words over the road noise, but it was obvious something was very off with the driver. It seemed almost unnatural how he could maintain any control of his vehicle while this was all going on. That part stuck with me more than anything else. It wasn't just general frustration. All his rage was directed at us. I remember feeling my frustration and anger spike a bit, because at that point it wasn't just annoying driving anymore. It was dangerous. He had just put both of us in a situation where a collision could have easily happened. My first instinct was to grab my phone and get the license plate, but everything happened too fast. By the time I reached for it, he had already started pulling away again. I said to my wife, "Try to get a picture if you can." She was already reaching for her phone, but the truck was moving quickly now, weaving just slightly ahead through the traffic, putting distance between us. I sped up a little, trying to close the gap just long enough for a photo, but it was pointless. The traffic flow ahead kept shifting, and he kept pulling away at the exact right moments where I couldn't safely match him. Within a minute or two, he was far enough ahead that I couldn't even clearly identify where his vehicle was at anymore. At that point, I tried to just focus on driving and let it go. Traffic was still moving in waves, and I figured maybe that was the end of it. But a few minutes later, I saw a black truck again up ahead in the distance. For a second, my stomach tightened because I thought it was him again. Same color, same general shape. But as we got closer, I realized it wasn't the same vehicle. I actually felt a brief moment of relief because I didn't want to deal with that again. Still, something about it made me uneasy. The situation had already put me on edge enough that every similar vehicle started to feel connected. We kept driving, and the road opened up more. Speeds increased, traffic spread out. That's when I noticed a black truck parked on the right shoulder further ahead. We drove by it so fast we couldn't figure out if it was the crazy truck from earlier. At first it looked like a breakdown, or maybe someone pulled over. But as we drove by closer, I thought I saw movement near the back of it, like a figure leaning into the bed of the truck, grabbing something or checking something inside. I couldn't make out the details clearly, just a big person and the truck sitting still on the shoulder. As we passed it, I remember thinking I just wanted to get far away from all of it, from the way the whole thing escalated so fast over nothing. My imagination really started to take over. Maybe he pulled over to wait for us to pass so he could fall in behind us again. Maybe he was reaching into the back of the truck for a weapon. We kept going, and eventually the road stretched out ahead again. Things calmed down, but I'll be honest, the rest of the drive didn't feel the same after that. Even though nothing else happened, I kept checking mirrors more than I should have. Every black truck after that felt like it might be the same one again, even though logically I knew it probably wasn't. The worst part is realizing how ordinary it all was, because any one of us, on any normal drive home, is only ever one unstable driver away from not being in control anymore.